All right, we are good to go. All right, good morning, everyone. Good morning, everybody. I am Kyle Nabors,
Welcome
along
to
with,
Monday, Kyle.
yeah, it's Monday morning. Uh, we have a few technical difficulties trying to get a hub set up here. He's restarting his computer to see if that works. Usually that does the trick whenever you run into a computer issue, right? First thing they tell you to do when you call in the tech support line, restart the computer. But while he does that, we didn't want to keep everyone waiting. So we're going to jump on here again. I am Kyle Nabors. You can find me on Twitter at Kyle Nabors. Along with me is our Bears beat reporter for ShawLocal.com, Sean Hammond. Yeah, we had planned on doing this Friday afternoon, Sean, but we had typically 9:30 a.m. on Fridays. We do this. We backed up to 3 o'clock so you guys could be at Hallis Hall on Friday morning and meet the new faces. Things went a little sideways there with them deciding to hold you guys back or ask you guys to stay back to introduce Justin Jones that afternoon. I believe it was Justin, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
We were supposed to get out of there by 1 and have I figured I would have time to get back home and do this on Friday afternoon around 3, but we wound up sticking around till about 4 to get Justin. So it was good to talk to him though.
yeah, it was a weird day at Hallis Hall, as everyone probably knows. You guys went in there on Friday morning expecting to meet Larry Ogunjobi, who was expected to sign a 3-year contract worth about $40 million, 40.5 million up to, I believe.
Up to
Um,
yep.
yeah, and then so I guess start with what happened on Friday morning.
Yeah. So well, the schedule on Friday, they gave us a window. It was 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. We were supposed to get the 3 players who had officially already signed, and we were under the impression Ogunjobi was one of those. Um, and then so 10 o'clock passes. We didn't really expect anybody to show up right at 10, but I don't know. It must have been about 10:30. A member of the Bears PR staff walks in and says he has an update and pretty much just says it out to the room. Oh, Larry Ogunjobi failed his physical. He's not going to sign today. He said some other stuff, but after that point, I kind of tuned out and I was rapidly writing a Twitter update to get that out to the world, and kind of missed the rest of what he said. But as far as Ogunjobi was concerned, that was the news. He's not signing, and obviously we all know that now. The failed physical, uh, basically cancel out that deal. So obviously he hadn't officially signed at that point, but you got to pass those physicals, otherwise the team's not gonna take you.
We can dive into some of the comments and questions here, and talking about Ogunjobi. We'll get Hub's take when he jumps on here. But CJ had asked the question: inauspicious start, felt strong. He's referring to Hub's headline on his column the other day. And to be completely honest with you, CJ, about probably 80% of the time I write those headlines. So inauspicious start. While that's I definitely, the feeling Hub was probably conveying, those were my words. So maybe he would say that was a bit strong, but I don't think so. But could the Ogunjobi move have been a rookie GM mistake? Quick turnaround and still addressing the need. Solid pickup in Jones and saved a few bucks for elsewhere. Sean, I mean, you definitely don't put it on Ryan Poles, and it's not something you should be, a pitchfork for. It's just unfortunate. I guess when I say inauspicious, I don't think you hold it against them. It's just it's not a great start when you're trying to rebuild a roster and have the guy, the first player that you identified, at least publicly, have that happen.
Yeah, I mean, you could chalk that up to a rookie GM mistake, but that could also happen to anybody. You don't know, especially these guys that are coming from other teams, where teams are so secretive about what's going on these days in the NFL. You don't know how bad a guy's injury is, and you don't know necessarily the truth about what he's been doing in the 2 months since he injured it in January, assuming that the injury is what held this physical up. Which I think is probably a safe assumption, but we don't actually know what went on when they visited with trainers. And yeah, it is a rough start, but they did the right thing. I think when it was all said and done, you're not going to take a guy who's injured, and certainly not at a price that contract was gonna hit you for.
Yeah. All right, we got Hub back in here. I'm going to throw him up onto the screen. Hub, you back with us here?
I am with you guys. Unfortunately, the computer is not going to cooperate, so I hope this sounds okay if we don't have too much of an echo. Are we good here?
So far, so good.
Okay, then we'll see if we can get it done this way. I assume that we said good morning to everybody. I'm sorry I'm late. I am battling computer issues here, and no, it's not the cranky old man. It's just the damn computer doesn't want to work right. So hopefully this sounds okay for you all. I guess you guys were talking about the Bears swing and miss when I joined you just now. I guess there's nothing else we could really call it.
Yeah, so I was explaining. CJ had mentioned your column, which in the headline I had put inauspicious start. He said he felt that was a bit strong. So I was explaining about 75 to 80% of the time on those headlines. It's probably something I wrote, and maybe that was a bit strong, but I don't think so. At least I don't think inauspicious start exactly pins it on Ryan Poles. It's an unfortunate start.
Yeah, CJ, it absolutely was inauspicious. I'll stand behind it. It was a good headline that Kyle wrote. What else could you say? I mean, you surprise everybody with a bigger move than we really expected them to make, a $40 million deal with $26 million guaranteed. Ogunjobi was, there's this narrative out there that he was hands down the top three technique available. I think he was the top three technique, but it was close enough between him and DJ Jones of the 49ers, and even BJ Hill on his own team, who the Bengals chose over him. So it's not like this is earth-shattering. It's not like it's the worst thing that's ever happened. It's not like, oh boy, we almost had Patrick Mahomes and he failed the physical. I mean, at the same time, when you make a move like that, you got to be pretty sure it was the one big move they were going to make. They hadn't given him the physical, and so I don't think there's anybody to blame here. I don't think it's the end of the world, but it does raise the question with the first big move from a brand new regime. Did they vet it properly? Did they do their homework? We all knew he'd had surgery 7 weeks ago. We all knew it was that dreaded Liz Frank thing that you're never sure about. And it feels to me, to be honest with you guys, like they did the physical, and everybody knows it's not completely healed 7 weeks after surgery. But I think they got cold feet. I think they saw something in the x-rays or the scans or whatever that concerned them that maybe it wasn't healing properly. It was interesting. There was some debate in the media room, Sean, with some of the guys saying, well, what that statement from Ryan Poles says is we're not signing him today. And so, you don't rule out the possibility that they let it heal for another month or two and take another look at it. Certainly, Larry Ogunjobi and his representation have to be furious because it's going to cost them a lot of money. This is out there everywhere now. It's the red mark he has to carry. The Roberto Garza story, a great Chicago Bear, 10 years with the team, 14 years in the league, had a similar situation. And that's how he ended up with the Bears, because the Bears took a chance on him. So I think Larry Ogunjobi will play again, but inauspicious, I think, describes this about as well as anything could. So I missed the first thing you said. CJ thought what? He thought it was just too harsh, or
He said felt strong. The wording inauspicious start.
I don't know. Felt literal to me. So I don't know.
A lot of questions coming in, and not surprisingly, asking about free agent update, and the name everyone really around this point of the NFL and free agency is Teron Armstead. I believe there was a report that he was visiting the Miami Dolphins this morning. Hub, here we'll throw up from Mark Keswick. What are you hearing on Armstead? You hearing any rumblings, Hub, connecting him to the Bears at this point?
I'm hearing that the Bears have attempted to be in on it, but they're not willing to put enough money on the table. And again, whether that is that they don't understand the market or whether they just have a limit that they've set and they've said this is what he's worth to us and this is what he isn't, that I don't know. But multiple sources have told me, yeah, Bears have tried. Bears have reached out. Bears have been part of the process, and they haven't been eliminated, by the way. And the fact that Armstead is in Miami doesn't tell us much. I mean, I'm pretty sure he's been to Miami before, and so it's more about getting in there and getting in the facility and getting comfortable. But I'm sure they're still basically recruiting him as well. I think we've known from the beginning, Sean, that there probably wasn't enough cap room in New Orleans for him to stay there, because he's been clear that was his first choice. I don't know how many of the folks that are with us today realize that he is from Southern Illinois, played at Acacia High School, I guess. I'd never heard of that. He was born in Belleville, so he's down south, more the St. Louis metro area than Chicago, but he's an Illinois guy. Whether that matters to him at this point or not, I don't know. But what I've heard is that the Bears would like to be in, but they're just not going to step up and pay enough.
Where do you think if that's the case, Hub? Where do you think they go if they're trying to find themselves a tackle? Because we've talked about this numerous times. They could look for a free agent tackle, maybe move Borum into guard, and certainly if the new guy Patrick plans to play center, that guard spot is still open.
Guys, the market changed because the two real prizes, Armstead was always the best left tackle, but the two real prizes were Orlando Brown and Cam Robinson, because Orlando Brown is 26 and Cam Robinson is 27 and Armstead is 31. So, these kids, of course, Brown was kept by the Chiefs and Robinson was tagged again by the Jaguars. Tells you what the Jaguars think about him. But the point there would be that, you get them signed, they're getting ready for their next crack at free agency at 31, which is where Armstead is now. So even though the Armstead's the better player right now, when those two guys were taken off the market with those tags, that's when it changed. But that said, the other guys, if you will, are all still out there. Eric Fisher has played the position, gone to a Pro Bowl. Riley Reif has played the position, at times well, at times not so well. I'm not. I'd rather take a chance on the kids than Riley Reif. I'm giving you the names, not the guys I'm looking for. Although Riley Reif could be an upgrade at right tackle. We keep forgetting they need two. We don't know at this point if Tevin Jenkins. I think Tevin Jenkins has a chance to be a really good right tackle. I don't see him as a left tackle. Larry Borum looked like he could play either, but he also was, rated most highly by the majority of teams playing guard, and now that position is open. It's curious what they're doing here, because the other thing I've heard from, again, multiple sources is the Bears didn't really even try to keep James Daniels. Ryan Poles told us that he wants to reimagine his offensive line. They want to go for a little different style. They want to get lighter. They want to get quicker. I thought of the five guys he had, James Daniels had the best ability to do that and was their best offensive lineman, and he did not get as much money as a lot of people thought he was going to get. But the fact that the Bears didn't make a big push for him to stay tells you that, Ryan Poles has a very different view of what he wants this offensive line to look like than what we may suspect. I'm not saying he's right or wrong. I'm not saying he's screwing up or he's doing a great job here. It's just that until we see the bodies he lines up, I'm not sure what he's going for here, because I don't think anybody can argue, Kyle, that Lucas Patrick is as good a prospect or as good a player as James Daniels, who is 5 years younger.
Yeah, one second. I definitely want to talk about the interior, what they're headed for the offensive line. I just want to, I'm going to answer. We're going to talk about Armstead a little bit more in a second. So I'm going to throw this up for Roger Simonson. No on Armstead, that won't help us long term. But I'm going to also follow that up with Jimmy K. And this is what I want to ask. Said Taron Armstead is not the answer for us. Jimmy, while we talk about the interior, can you follow up with us there and let us know why you're saying that, to give me a little more context? But so if we talk about the the interior of the offensive line, I agree, Hub, in terms of, I'm surprised that they didn't make a push to bring back James Daniels. It just seemed such an easy way to solidify that the center of your offensive line there with Whitehair. Even if you felt like, okay, we needed an upgrade from Mustipher, we're going to bring in a Patrick from Green Bay to shore up center, and then you have Daniels on, then you're set there. But by not bringing Daniels, by not having a replacement or bringing in a replacement for James Daniels, now you're really in flux at both the interior of your offensive line and at the tackle position. I mean, there's no way you can say that you've gotten better at the offensive line position at least a week into free agency.
Well, you're worse. There's no question about that. I mean, we thought the interior was relatively set if you bring Daniels back. Even if you want upgrades, as you just pointed out, go ahead and sign Patrick. I had the first question of that press conference, and I expected a non-answer. I asked him, do you have any indication from the team whether you're here to play guard or center? And I was sure he was going to say, well, I'm here to compete at both, and we'll figure it out. But he was clear. He was told he's coming here to play center. He expects to be the starter. Obviously, Sam Mustipher does not figure strongly in the Bears' plans, although they did re-sign him. Don't forget that they had all those restricted and exclusive rights free agents that they had to tender, and Mustipher was one of the few that they did tender. Now, that may be because they think there's some other value. Maybe they get a 7th-round pick for him, or maybe it's for depth. I don't know. I don't see Mustipher playing guard. But the lost part in this, Kyle, is that I believe James Daniels could be a better center than a guard. that's what he was drafted to be. He was one of the best center prospects coming out. So, I mean, this is a 1-for-1 swap of James Daniels for Lucas Patrick. And when you realize that the offensive line, in many people's eyes, other than wide receiver, is your biggest concern, James Daniels got significantly less money from the Steelers than the Bears were prepared to pay Larry Ogunjobi. Look at those two contracts and the guaranteed money in them. And so, this is why they call it the honeymoon period, guys. And we are early on into it before we get a sense for who Ryan Poles and Matt Eberflus are and what they're going to do and the right and wrong of it. But what we have at this point is a puzzle, when I kind of expected to see some clarity here, Sean.
Yeah, we don't have a lot of clarity. And I know this process is still playing out. We have to see what shakes out this week. Maybe they are still I just have to think they're going to be looking at a tackle and move Borum to that right guard spot. But who knows? We've been surprised already with some of these moves, and certainly there could be more surprises on the horizon. And they're going to have the draft to sort of sort this out too as well. So at this point, I'm willing to hold tight and see what shakes out here.
Yeah, and Kyle, I don't know if we've heard back yet as to why he thinks that Teron Armstead is not the answer, and he may not be. Free agency is not an exact science. But at 31, and if you're looking at a 4 or 5 year deal, you still got him for offensive tackles in the second half of his prime. I mean, another name out there is Dwayne Brown, and people smile because he's 37 years old, but there's a market for him. And it could be, again, when we look at what Ryan Poles wants to do here, that you look at one of these older guys. I don't think there's any chance they can bring back Jason Peters at 40. He doesn't, fit the lighter and quicker mode. But Teron Armstead absolutely does. That's the kind of left tackle he is. He's got great leadership and character grades. Everything about him. Teron Armstead is the guy for them right now, because he can not only be part of the bridge to the next generation of Bears, he can still be part of that team when they're ready to win. If the Bears are not ready to compete in 2023, how much patience do you think there's going to be around town with Ryan Poles and Matt Eberflus? I mean, the honeymoon is there now, but listen, I think that Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy got what they deserved. It was time. This last season was a disaster. But when you look at the 4-year stretch, they were not treated fairly with the analysis and the criticism and the negativity that surrounded them, in those last 6-8 weeks. And so, looking at how quickly the crowd turned on them, if the Bears are willing to go 2-15 and get a number 1 overall pick this year, and I'm not saying we're there yet. We got a lot of work. I mean, half the roster is only not full. They got to sign 90 guys. They've got 49. But if something like that happens, then they were to come back in 23 and still only be a 5 or 6 win team. I can promise you the Wolves are going to be out for these guys.
I absolutely agree. Well, I mean, if they win 2 games, even with a watered down roster, when you draft a quarterback that high in year 2, if you're still only winning 2 games, to me, that would be a major concern. But quickly, Jimmy did answer. He said Armstead has never played a full season in the NFL. I think injury concerns with Teron Armstead, if you're worried about that, I think that's completely valid. And this kind of ties in. Roger followed up. And in my opinion, Armstead too old and injury prone to risk big money. Again, I get the injury part. The too old thing, as you were pointing out, and this idea of a rebuild, I was going back and forth with a few people on Twitter about it the other day about wide receivers too, is like the NFL window, like they should be preparing to compete in 2023. Even in a rebuild, you should be preparing to compete. You need players around Justin Fields to develop him. And also, like, the people want to talk about too, the Bears have so much money. Well, why spend the money now? You have so much money in 2023 and 2024 for the cap and stuff. NFL free agency isn't like Major League Baseball where you can go out and find yourself 7 or 8 blue chippers in a single offseason, right? Like, there's no way to spend that type of money unless you're just being Jacksonville type stupid.
Well, there is ways to spend that type of money, but I don't know if it's as smart.
You need to spread that money over a few year period, really. And particularly like the cap, even if you sign a bunch of big name guys last year, those cap hits don't immediately hit the way NFL structure money is structured. That guaranteed money, so that cap hit's not going to hit until 25 and 26 anyway, for the most part. So you have this money, like you might as well start building a few of those guys in now. And Armstead, one of those guys. I was going back and with like Juju, DJ Chark, Will Fuller, some of these younger wide receivers. Even if it was a 1 or 2 year deal, if you were worried about the cap room, you had a chance to get a look at some young upside talent. You know what? If it worked out, that's great. You found someone that you can then try and extend. If not, it didn't really hurt your cap room, overall 2 or 3 years down the road, Hub.
Yeah, I mean, guys, I think we're missing maybe even the bigger topic here, because the injury concerns with Armstead are certainly fair, and it's something that I wrote about when we did the whole offensive tackle analysis, and that's the big question, and that's probably why the Bears seem to have set a price limit on him that isn't going to work, because again, they've been in, but they're not willing to spend what some other teams are willing to spend, and it's why they seem unlikely to get him. And I understand it from an injury perspective, but when you say too old, you're just wrong. I mean, that's not the way it's working in the NFL today. Von Miller is 33 years old, just got a $128 million deal from Buffalo. Now, that's silly. Some of it was voidable years to try and make it cap friendly, but they guaranteed $68 million. And Teron Armstead is not going to get that big a guarantee or more. And, not only is he 2 years younger, but offensive tackles historically play a lot longer than pass rushers. I mean, edge rushers at 33 for that kind of money. Devontae Adams is going to be in his 30-year-old season this year. He's 1 year behind Armstead. He just got the biggest guarantee in history for a wide receiver, another position that doesn't last the way these guys do. So age is not a factor, but the injuries are, at least in Armstead's case. And then the other piece of it, guys, is that what's working in the NFL right now? Look at your last 2 Super Bowl champions. The aging, old Tampa Bay Buccaneers went out and got a 43-year-old quarterback and won a Super Bowl. The Los Angeles Rams mortgaged the 20s, basically. If they fall apart this year, they may not compete again until 2030, but they don't want draft choices. They're not worried about any of this stuff. So you got to stay current with the league and what teams are doing now and how they're trying to win. And again, yes, the Bears needed to clean house. They needed to create some cap space. Whatever they do this year is reasonable. But this cannot be a complete teardown where you want to be the Cincinnati Bengals and have a top 10 pick 5 years in a row or something like that, because that's not what works in the NFL these days.
Well, I mean, but even with the Bengals, what you see in the NFL now is we like to talk about championship windows, right? Your championship window opens once you find that quarterback, and as long as that quarterback remains on your roster. Mm-hmm. And at that, once you get that in place, which we hope the Bears have that in place now, that means your championship window should be open. Doesn't mean you're going to be there right away. But I mean, you just saw Joe Burrow tore his ACL in his rookie year, but was able to get back, and they still made it to the Super Bowl. And there were definitely flaws on that Cincinnati Bengals team. I mean, that is not a perfect NFL team. But this idea that you tear something down in the NFL and rebuild it, and you open up this 4 or 5 year window is not correct. Teams, general managers, front offices, they're looking for the quarterback, and then they're consistently turning that team over and rebuilding it. And it's just how the NFL works. It's the way. There's a reason you see all these, guys cut 2 or 3 years into the deal. It's once they get into back into those contracts, you cycle them out, and you just keep building. That's how teams like the Rams are able to do. And we wonder how. You look at the Saints. Well, how do they keep figuring a way to get around the salary cap? It's just the way NFL teams are built now.
Yeah, I mean, you still want to build around young blue chip talent. There's no question about that. That was actually my column for today's papers, and I don't know if it's posted yet, but looking at the first week of free agency, and I went back to the Bill Polian comments that we heard about 5-6 weeks ago. I think he was visiting with Tommy Waddle and Mark Silverman on ESPN Radio. I want to give credit, but I'm not sure where they originated from. It may have been from a podcast with those guys. But Polian described the job of becoming a Hall of Fame GM and franchise builder like he is. And he said that you need 10 to 12 blue chippers to compete, that from what he had heard from evaluators around the league, he thought the Bears had maybe 6 to 8. Well, if they had 6 to 8, they have 2 or 3 now, because there's no question that their 2 best players were Khalil Mack and Allen Robinson, and they're gone. Akeem Hicks was absolutely one of their blue chippers, and we can't imagine that he's going to be back. I would think that James Daniels, he certainly was their best offensive lineman. I don't know if he's a blue chipper or not. But really, what they have left to build around right now, if you're talking about blue chip talent, I would consider David Montgomery, because I think running back, I look at production, and you could maybe call him a blue chipper. Certainly Roquan Smith is a blue chip. You hope that Justin Fields is, but you can't say that yet, because last year he was historically bad. Now, as a rookie quarterback, I still think he is a blue chip prospect. But other than that, guys, what do you got? You got Robert Quinn. He's a 32-year-old blue chipper. I mean, it's gotten about as low as it can get in that frame of reference. And then I turn around, I look at a team like the Bengals, like you're talking about, Kyle. I don't see 10 to 12 blue chippers. I think they had one of those magic years, assuming that this is the only way it can work. They had one of those magical runs where they were 10-7, guys. I mean, you're not talking about a dominant franchise.
Well, the big thing here, and I'll throw it worked for the Bengals, so Search said, and Sean, it worked for the Bengals, but they also didn't have to trade up for their quarterback. They had the number 1 overall pick, and then they also had other first round picks. I mean, you look at the Bears. They took T. Higgins in the first round that same draft. They took Jamar Chase, 5th overall, 4th overall this past draft.
I think.
I mean, the Bears did not have a first round pick 2 years ago. Then obviously they traded up for Justin Fields. They don't have a first round pick this year as well. I mean, that makes a big difference when you're talking about limited draft picks, Sean.
Yeah, it certainly helps to have that first overall pick, and even. It's unfortunate that the Bears don't have a first round pick this year, obviously, but I don't know that I don't know. Do you guys feel that Ryan? I don't know if Ryan Poles can be sold that Justin Fields is the blue chip guy yet. We just haven't seen enough out of it, and everything that he's done is, creating possibilities in the future with the cap space and with some of these guys who he's signing and the guys that they've gotten rid of. And I just think that I'm not so sure that he's sold on Justin Fields being the quarterback that's going to take them to the next level. Now he can be, he certainly can be. And maybe, there's probably hopeful of that, but the way that they're building this, they certainly don't seem like they're certainly not maximizing their opportunity to make use of his rookie deal and the lower price tag on Justin Fields at this point.
Guys, I think it's pretty clear since Bill Polian was the head of the search committee that found Ryan Poles that there is some connection there between these comments. What Ryan Poles is trying to do is to build a football team around as many blue chip talents as he can acquire. And he looked at what he had, saw he didn't have enough, saw some of them were aging, and said, okay, now is the time to create the assets to go out and acquire those talents. Now, let's not forget that the Bears' number 1 blue chipper, Khalil Mack, was acquired via trade. Maybe number 2, Robert Quinn, was acquired as a middle-aged free agent. There are ways to do it. It's not just in the draft, but what he has devoted this season to is to creating as much cap space going forward and to we haven't gone through the draft yet to see what kind of deals they'll make, but we assume to start to reaccumulate draft choices to build the most talented roster that he can. And they're not there yet. And so that's why, let's go all the way back to the start. Inauspicious beginning to free agency. It was because they tried to add one special talent and it didn't work out. Not that they screwed up or were wrong, it didn't work out. But that clearly is what's happening here. That's what these moves have been about. And anybody who says that they are sure that they have their blue chip franchise quarterback in Justin Fields is either just guessing or lying, because there's no way you can be sure. We've got 101 years of NFL history that tells us how this works with these quarterbacks. And so I think the fact that they've got the guy they want to try with is a big plus, because now you don't have to give up multiple first rounders. But if you want to make the Bengals analogy, at least be realistic about it. The reason the Bengals had that magical season is because the year after being one of the worst teams in the league with getting Joe Burrow, they were again one of the worst teams in the league, and they got Jamar Chase with the 5th round pick, who is a generational blue chip talent. And without Jamar Chase, they don't even get to the playoffs this year. I mean, he had that. Look at his numbers, guys. Look at the game stats. I mean, he had that big an impact on that football team. Well, the Bears would have had the 7th pick, but they don't, because that's what it cost them for Justin Fields. So they're likely going to be twiddling their thumbs until 39 or wherever they are. And that doesn't make it impossible. It makes it that much harder.
And Joe Burrow in that injury-shortened rookie season, I mean, even through, I don't remember how many games it was, 8 games, you could tell that he was a very talented quarterback. You know, you could tell that they were set at that spot. And I don't know that you can say that with Justin Fields at this point based on what we saw. Now, obviously, the coaching staff plays a lot into that and what they were trying to do offensively. Let me ask you this, Hub, because Kyle and I were talking about this on Friday, I think it was. Do you think they're trying to maximize their cap rollover into 23 and that unused cap space that they don't use next year in the NFL, you can roll that over to the next year? Is that what they're trying to do here to maximize the amount of money they can spend in 23?
Well, first of all, let me be a little more emphatic, and I'll take the arrows if it's necessary. I would say that let's be honest. Joe Burrow had a far superior rookie season than Justin Fields, even with the ACL tear. We found out immediately that the young man could play in the NFL. We still don't know if Justin Fields, he can play, but we don't know if he can play well. Again, and I always have to preface this because I know what's coming. I like Justin Fields. I think they may have the right guy. I think he's a great prospect. We're just trying to be, honest about where this team is at right now. And then
we're trying to look at it through Ryan Pohl's eyes.
Yeah. Well, yes. Or any of the other talent
or any GM
experts around the league. And then specifically to answer your question, Sean, I understand why people might wonder about that, but my answer would be no, because you get back to, you only got 49 players under contract, and you got to have 90, and you got to finish with 53. And so, yeah, maybe you could argue, well, you're only 4 short of the guys who are going to make it. But of the 49 that you have under contract, half of them are on the minimum deals and aren't going to make the team. They're still looking to sign at least 5 or 6 more starters. I mean, that's what they still have to find, whether those are rookies or guys in free agency. And even with the cap space they have, once you get in these $3-4 million a year deals, now if you're looking for 5 or 6 guys, you've spent another $20-25 million in cap space. So I think they'll be happy to have some rollover space. But the reason they're sitting on so much space now is, again, because they swung and missed on Ogunjobi. They had committed that money. And Justin Jones may turn out to be the better player, but he cost a lot less. And the rest of this money is sitting there. And they're not out of the Teron Armstead thing. I mean, it looks like it's not going to end up that way, but they could still surprise us. There still are a few pretty good football players out there who are going to be a little bit more expensive, and so until we get to the draft where you got to assume you're near done in free agency, at least in terms of any expensive signings, can't speculate on what they're doing with that cap space.
Let's see. So I see you've asked several times in here about first team reps in the offseason. That is not going to make or break Justin Fields. Like everyone's holding on to everyone. And listen, I don't know where to even go with this at this point.
I mean, that might be why he sucked in Cleveland last year, but certainly he had plenty of time with first team reps after that.
Yeah. I mean, what happened last April and May and rookie minicamp and stuff did not have that big of an impact in December gameplay.
It is an excuse to crucify Matt Nagy. And you know what, guys?
I mean, listen, there are plenty of reasons to crucify Matt Nagy, and I dislike the plan for the way they handled Justin Fields to begin with. But there was a large enough sample size of him on the field that you can't just pin it all on him not having first team reps in training camp, guys.
Guys, the biggest mistake that Matt Nagy made last year was in not allowing Nick Foles to compete with Andy Dalton. It wasn't in how he handled Justin Fields. Justin Fields' year was because that's what happens to rookie quarterbacks in the NFL, and you could have given him every first-team rep and it wouldn't have mattered. He wasn't ready because he did not know how to read what he was seeing on the football field. He was holding the ball too long, and that is a process that you get with almost every rookie quarterback. Remember, Trevor Lawrence and Zach Wilson were thought to be far superior, not far superior, but superior prospects. That's why they went 1 and 2 instead of 11. And Justin might have even sat there longer if the Bears hadn't made the trade. And don't forget that they did get all the first team reps for the most part. Trevor Lawrence was an alleged competition, but he got the job, fairly early in training camp, and they were still historically bad. So, you can go where you want with this, but the first team reps thing was a straw man from the moment it came up, and it still is today. It had nothing to do with Justin Fields' performance last year.
Brandon Lawson follows.
Brandon's comment is making me laugh here.
First team reps from trash coaching is pointless, and we can debate that. I mean, whether you want to say it was Matt Nagy and his staff was trash, it probably was. You can definitely say that about what was happening in Jacksonville, but yeah, I mean, Justin Fields, if you want to say it was a combination of bad coaching and him not being able to read the field, I mean, that's fine. But you can't, to me, you can't put it solely on coaching and the lack of first team reps early in the season. You can say it was a bad plan, and I'll agree with that. But Justin Fields had a large enough sample size on the field that there should be concerns. And it doesn't mean I still think he's going to be a good quarterback. But definitely have more concerns now after the first season than going into his rookie year. And the other thing is, I think, Sean, you're right. If I think there are at least some questions within the new front office about what they have in Justin Fields. Otherwise, I do think they would probably be more aggressive in this offseason.
I think they're probably cautiously optimistic at this point. Certainly nothing they've done seems to indicate they're really going for much here in 2022. They're leaving their options open in 23. But I mean, we haven't even touched on the wide receivers. What do you guys think about what they have done or not done at wide receiver in free agency here?
Sean, you better grab some shoulder pads. I don't know.
I could give them some height.
That's to say you're tall enough, because I have no idea what they're doing at wide receiver.
Well, what they're doing is they're focusing on the draft, obviously, which is supposed to be rich in blue chip talent. And again, there's still some interesting names out there if you're willing to take a chance if they don't find what they wanted in the draft, and then you come around with free agency again next year. I think we need to acknowledge, guys, that wide receivers kind of are becoming more and more like running backs. You can find them pretty much anywhere in the draft. First round is nice, but there's some great ones that have come out of the second, third, fifth round. You also have to take a look at just the reality of the injury situation and how fragile these guys can be. And they don't have to fix everything at once. The reason I think that there's been so much focus on the offensive line and wide receiver is, how do you improve Justin Fields if you don't improve the tools and the weapons that he has? And guys, this whole, I think that they're more than cautiously optimistic with Justin Fields. I think they're probably excited that they have a potential franchise prospect. That's why these jobs were thought to be so highly sought after from people around the league. But it was Peyton Manning, I think, who just came out and said that he didn't really feel like he'd arrived in the NFL until his fourth year in the league. And you take a look at his second and third seasons, which were much better than the first year. So this idea that Justin Fields was all about the coaching is just football stupid. I mean, John DeFilippo is a highly respected quarterback coach around the National Football League. Everything that went wrong with Justin Fields was part of the natural process of these young quarterbacks evolving. It's Joe Burrow who's the exception to the rule. It's not Justin Fields. So we got to get over that. And just, the fact is, guys, that the Bears have not yet made a franchise building move, if you think about it. I mean, they're trying to fill out a roster, trying to install a system. They're trying to figure out which of the young players they have may be worth keeping. I mean, I said that the only, blue chippers at this point are David Montgomery and Roquan Smith, but they certainly hope that Justin Fields will be. They hope that Darnell Mooney can be. They hope that Tevin Jenkins and Larry Borum can be. You go back on the other side, they hope Jaylon Johnson is, and that maybe Travis Gibson becomes something special. And I think the one free agent they signed that is the most intriguing is this Nicholas Morrow, because while he is undersized, even more so than Roquan Smith, if he stays healthy, he's an interesting football player. And so what they're doing now is they're focused on understanding the young bodies they have, trying to find out what their ceilings are and maximize them, and add other guys with that type of potential while they clear the assets to go after, the big fish or the elephants, so to speak.
And to me, though, we get into it when it comes to wide receiver. You looked at some guys in free agency. DJ Chark, I believe, is only 25, 26. Juju Smith-Schuster, I believe, turns 26 this upcoming season. Will Fuller, I believe, is going to be 28. Obviously, Will has had a really tough time staying on the field. But to me, that was an area where there was some that could be a part of this team 3 or 4 years down the road. That did immediately improve the position, and it gave, it put more weapons around Justin Field. Hub.
Well, again, guys, but there's a reason these guys only got 1-year deals, and so Poles told us at the combine. He said from the jump, we're going to be busy in the second and third wave of free agency. Well, free agency is 4 days old, and I think and by the way, I reread his quote last night. He said one of the reasons is because people always overpay in free agency. He said you're paying market price, and so I think his perspective is probably that even at $10 or $11 million, that Juju Smith-Schuster and DJ Chark got too much money, and I kind of like Juju, although he missed all of last season. He had that phenomenal second year in the league. But DJ Chark it really did nothing in Jacksonville to get you excited to say that he's a number 1 or number 2 receiver. He's a big-bodied, interestingly young talent. I know what, Kyle, I can see the look on your face. I understand what he was dealing with.
I'd say before Urban Meyer got there, I think he was doing okay for himself. I think
look at his numbers. He was never very productive. I mean, he never gave them anything more than a 2.5 type, number 2.5 type season. I know folks, if you're new to us, he's been Kyle's guy since January.
DJ Chark's been my guy for about 3 years, but
but there's another answer to all these questions.
I mean, we're talking. He was 73 reception, 1,000 yards, 8 touchdowns in his 2019 season, 118 targets. I'd say that's pretty good for a 23-year-old receiver.
If he's really that good, though, he's going to be on the market next year. He signed a 1-year deal. I'm sure he's betting on himself and hoping to get that multi-year deal next year.
Get him out of that. Now, I don't know how much better it's going to be if it's Jared Goff and what's going on in Detroit, although they've had an interesting – I'll say one thing for the Lions, for a 3-14 team or whatever they were, they're re-signing all their own people, which is interesting. But, guys, 3 guys have gotten paid. The only 2 legit number 1s in Devontae Adams and Allen Robinson, and then Christian Kirk, who was the most likely next number 1, but the Jaguars gave him stupid money, just like you were saying, Kyle. And I think that I know I'd be outraged as an analyst if the Bears had given Christian Kirk that contract, but I think he was the guy, other than the known number 1s, that at least maybe you had said that's a flyer we would take. Let me turn this question around you. Would you rather have DJ Chark or Juju Smith-Schuster or Will Fuller than Darnell Mooney? Any one of them?
No.
Okay, then you're not upgrading yourself. That's the point.
But you need more than one wide receiver. I mean, how many legitimate wide receivers do you have on this roster currently?
Kyle, we're not disagreeing. I'm just making the point why not signing those guys is actually consistent with what Poles has said he wants to do.
I know it's consistent with what he wants to do. I'm saying it's wrong, is what I'm saying.
Well, you may be right, but I just think it's too early to say that one way or the other. That's why we kept coming back to this honeymoon period, and I think I said it near the top, or at least once I finally figured out my computer and joined you guys, or close to the top, is all I'm looking for is clarity as to who he is and what his plan is and what we have to expect, because this is at least the next 3 years, guys. I mean, people forget, Mark Trestman only got 2 years, but that was year 3 for Phil Emery. I'm not sure that if you don't give a GM that you went through that search process for and that was so highly thought of and a top candidate in other spots, if you don't give him at least 3 years because you know how bad things were broken, well, then your franchise is doomed to failure forever. Maybe they are. The Bears at this point. I don't believe
This is
that.
getting really.
Guys, I don't believe that for a minute. But when you look at their record over the last just go over the last, that one Super Bowl in 06. I mean, they're not in the bottom tier, but they're in that next tier, near the bottom of consistently underperforming franchises.
We're getting real dark and dramatic here now.
Well, I think what we just settled on there is they're not Jacksonville or Detroit bad, but they're maybe New York Giants level bad.
Well, they've actually been a much better organization than Cincinnati, as they've been bad over the last 15, 16 years, and Cincinnati just played in the Super Bowl. So that's why the only point I'm trying to make is I can't get too excited about any of this in Ryan Pohl's second month on the job. I guess maybe I'm using too many words to say it that simply. We just have to give this time. And it's going to be frustrating. I was worried, Kyle, because I think I've mentioned that 3 or 4 times in columns over the last 3-4 weeks, and I don't want people to think I'm harping on it, but apparently I have to because people aren't paying attention. It's going to be very frustrating for the next year and a half or two. I believe that.
Yeah, Timothy Wire just said, "Will we really grasp Pohl's vision?" Or I think will we really grasp Pohl's vision? Is until second year as GM, or what it actually is until second. I think at this point, we're probably not going to have a great idea of where this franchise is headed until after the 2022 season, Hub.
Yeah, Tim, I mean, I think he's told us what his vision is. I think what we're looking for is his ability to institute it or to make it happen. And honestly, what he's done so far is fairly consistent with that. I think they made a mistake in the Khalil Mack trade because you can see what's happening already. I mean, people are frustrated, and we haven't gotten to the draft. We're 3 days into free agency, but there is not going to be a lot of patience with these guys. This is the hangover from the way the atmosphere and the mood turned on Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy. And if you want to live there, you can, but you're not going to be satisfied. I mean, you have to accept that whatever you think of the job that Pace and Nagy did, this is a rebuild. I asked, it was, guys, what did I have? The third question at the introductory press conference. And I knew this is where we were going to go. I said, guys, is the intention to reload and try and compete right away or to rebuild? And they both said, oh, we're going to compete this year. We want to compete right away. And I was a little surprised. Nobody wants to say rebuild because then it tells everybody that they have to live exactly where they're living right now with all of this. But they won't use the word. They still haven't said it. When we talked again at the Combine, Ryan Poles was looking about finding all the hidden gems in the second and third wave of free agency and guys who are going to outperform because they're in contract years on short-term deals. And I think there's some truth in that. And that may work out that way. Again, Morrow really intrigues me. Byron Pringle, I think, probably is better than he was his first 3 years in Kansas City. He's still only a number 3 receiver, but let me put it another way. He's probably an upgrade over Marquise Goodwin and Damiere Byrd, from what we saw last year, and that's what you're trying to do. But at the end of the day, when they dealt Mack, they don't have to say it. It's a rebuild, okay? When you give him up for just a second-round pick, and so now the question is, will they go all in? I would not be at all surprised to see Robert Quinn dealt between now and the draft, depending on what they can get for him. Now, you're obviously going to get a lot less for him than you got for Mack, even after the year that he had. And so at some point, maybe they think he has value as a role model for these young kids they're bringing in. But the bottom line is when they made that Khalil Mack deal, that said, this is a complete rebuild. And so that's why you got to lower your expectations for this first year or two.
Can you get a third rounder for Robert Quinn?
I would have thought you could have gotten a late first rounder for Khalil Mack, or at least a second and a third instead of a second and a sixth a year later. I certainly would have thought you could have gotten more than, what was it, a 5 or a 6 for Robert Woods. And he's not in Khalil Mack's league, and not in Robert Quinn's league. So when you look at how these trades are coming down, it's only the quarterbacks where you see these stupid trades where teams are obviously overpaying, but I don't know if they can get a three for Robert. Well, you would think so. He just led the NFC in sacks, but that's not the way the market appears to work right now.
And Sean, I mean, we're talking about the way things are looking. If you're a fan that says burn it down, rebuild it, it's fine if they lose a bunch of games. You also have to be the fan that understands, and you can't, or I shouldn't say you can't get upset, but you should. Early in that season, that first time Justin Fields takes 6 sacks in a game, it's going to be ugly a lot of times if you burn it down to and you put Tevin Jenkins and Larry Borum out there and you just go young.
Yeah, if that's what they wind up doing, it could get ugly, and it comes down to how much patience the McCaskies have. It's really not about us on the outside or the fans. It's are the McCaskies willing to wait and see out this Ryan Poles couple of years like we were talking about? And we've seen different. How long did Jerry Reinsdorf not want to rebuild the White Sox, Kyle? I mean, it seemed like forever they were sticking Band-Aids on that until they finally just ripped it off and went for it. I don't know if this is quite on that level. Obviously the White Sox had to get real bad before they could get good, and baseball is certainly a different animal than football. But how patient are the McCaskies with Ryan Poles? Because that's really all that matters in this situation.
Well, and guys, to go a step further though, as I think I was just trying to touch on, they have no choice for the next 2 years, and so that's why I think the place to be is to redirect the conversation and to look at the guys they have brought in and to look at who's still available. As I said, there's still plenty of starting talent out there, but the next big step for me in understanding Ryan Poles is going to be what happens in the draft. If they start moving backwards to accumulate picks, that's consistent with what I think they're trying to do. If they stand still and try and find a couple blue chippers with those 2 second-round picks, or maybe package the 2 2s to move up at back of the first round and hope that with a late 1 and a 3 they can find a couple of cornerstone pieces, that's consistent with it. If they start mortgaging next year's assets to get up into the middle of the first round, then I start to get very nervous, and then you begin to wonder if they do understand their own plan. But I think that's going to be the next touchstone or checkpoint for us is how do they handle this draft?
Just noticed Potsy's popped into the chat here, Hub.
Oh, we'll put him up. I mean, Potsy's one of my favorite. Who is that here? Is that the stat? Potsy's having fun. I thought he was going to hire me for being too hard on the Bears. I mean, I'm the one who's sitting here saying how bad they are right now. So, yeah, well, Potsy, I'll answer that for you. There's plenty of teams out there that don't have 4 playoff wins in the last 32 seasons. I don't know plenty, but there's a handful. So, I think Potsy is speaking more to some of our questioners and some of our fans who don't want to accept that what Ryan Poles has to do is he has to do this completely differently from the way it's been done by Ryan Pace and Phil Emery and even Jerry Angelo, although Angelo did get to the 1 Super Bowl, and then Mark Hatley before them, even though Hatt never had the title, he was kind of the guy in this role. They got to do it differently than the way they've been doing it the last 20, 30 years or 32 years, I think was the stat that he used. And that's what Ryan Poles appears to be doing at the start. Now, how consistent he's going to be and what the steps are, it can be interesting to see.
We're getting near an hour here. Probably should wrap it up, but someone had asked earlier about a couple of safeties still on the market. Obviously, a position the Bears can still improve at. So I'm going to throw it to you guys. You guys have been tracking this a lot closer than I have. Given what's left on the free agent market, and there are some intriguing names we've talked about, obviously a tackle position. Where are a couple areas you think the Bears can still attack to try and improve?
Well, first of all, real quick, I'm just assuming everybody knows who Potsy is. Mark Potash is one of the best guys on the beat, the Chicago Bears beat, writes for the Chicago Sun-Times. I think most of you know that, but be sure and follow Potsy at the Sun-Times, at their website, and at his Twitter handle, because Mark is really a treat and one of the more knowledgeable veteran guys on the beat. Kyle, I don't think anything's changed. I mean, you need 2 starting wide receivers. You have to plan on having 3 starting wide receivers. They have 1 in Darnell Mooney. Byron Pringle kind of became number 3 by default in Kansas City, but I don't know that he's good enough to even count on for that, or at least hasn't proven that yet. So I think you're still looking for 2 starting wide receivers. You're looking for at least 2 starters on the offensive line. I mean, even if you think that Lucas Patrick and Cody Whitehair, if you expect Borum and Jenkins to start and be efficient, at least 1, but probably 2. You've got to have depth at tight end. It's been a very quiet tight end market. I was surprised that the Bengals let Uzoma get away to Buffalo. Uzoma, I guess, is the way to pronounce it. And they still need a starting cornerback, and they still need 2 starting linebackers. Or even if Nicholas Morrow is one of them, you need 1 more. So the interesting thing to me about Ogunjobi is that even with Hicks, assuming that Hicks isn't back, and with Bilal Nichols getting away, they still had some depth there. I mean, Angelo Blackson isn't bad. He's a kind of a journeyman, but he's a guy who can start for you and make some plays. And Kairos Tonga was impressive last year. And Mario Edwards Jr. can definitely create some push when he's out there. And Robert Quinn is now one of your starting defensive linemen. So I thought it was interesting that Ogunjobi, they were looking for a cornerstone piece for that 3-4. They weren't just looking, for a guy to fill that spot for a year or two. And by the way, even though you re-signed DeAndre Houston Carson, he was your number 4 safety last year. So you need a starting safety, you need a starting corner, you need a starting linebacker, you need a starting offensive lineman, and 2 starting wide receivers. So that's at least 6 starters.
Is that all? That
we're
all?
talking about young talent or improving guys you got to fill these starting spots. So that's where I expect they continue to shop in free agency.
It's just, yeah, and someone asked, like I said, the safety there. One of the names was definitely I saw the Honey Badger Tyrann Mathieu. And it's hard to know exactly who they're going to target because, someone like that you think makes sense, but that's a veteran player, and we've seen them kind of shy away from that, right? Like if in this first wave they haven't do that, why would they kind of shift that direction now? Unless guys really start to drop off in price, which I don't think we're at that point yet.
Well, I think the answer to that, and Sean, I'm going to jump in on you on that, but I mean, I think the answer, Kyle, is that they've got to get stable on the offensive line before they get better if they're going to help Justin Fields. They've got to get stable at wide receiver before they get better if they're going to help Justin Fields. And so there, you got to start shopping the late 20s or early 30s, or else you're not going to get starting caliber talent. And so I don't think if Ryan Poles does that, Sean, that would be, going away from what he has said he was going to do or is trying to do. I think that's part of the reality of the situation in year 1.
Yeah. And they are going to need bodies at that position. And, you just look at what they have, even with the guys they've signed, they don't have a whole lot of guys. And I still think a tackle could be maybe the big splash they go for here. I don't know that it doesn't sound like they would spend for an Armstead. But I still think that's a position that they could really benefit from. And yeah, when I'm looking at free agency, it's wide receiver and the offensive line. We've been saying that for weeks, but it's still the case based on what they've done so far.
Guys, I mean, one of the interesting, we keep wondering what Ryan Poles thinks of Justin Fields. He's basically said nothing about Tevin Jenkins. And if they don't bring in a veteran left tackle, then I think he may be indicating that he thinks he can play the position too. Maybe they like Larry Borum out there, but to me, I think it's probably mostly about Jenkins and where they see the fit. And so I'd watch that kind of closely, because I think if they don't bring in, what now looks to be an older veteran there, that they may be saying that they agree with Ryan Pace, that they think Jenkins is a left tackle. I don't see it. And I'm not talking to a lot of people who think that, but I think it's one of the really interesting decisions to watch.
I guess I said we were going to wrap it up there. I'm going to throw this up one more. I think this is probably a better place to actually close from Kwai. Do you 3 believe the Bears can get the 6th or 7th playoff spot? I do. Green Bay, Bucks, Cowboys, Rams, 49ers. Can't the Bears compete with everyone else? And that's why I think this is a good place to end it, because, you look at the way things have gone this offseason with the amount of talent that has shifted over to the AFC. That's the other thing with the complete rebuild. The NFC is pretty much wide open right now. I still like the Rams. I mean, the Bucks are solid, but we saw last year, that Tampa Bay team is not unbeatable. You're dealing with a 44, 45-year-old Tom Brady at this point. Green Bay has had success in the regular season and immediately bowed out in the playoffs. To me, the NFC is about as wide open right now as it's ever going to get.
Well, yeah, quiet. To Kyle's point, he's absolutely correct. The conference is open, but my answer for you is with the 49 players under contract, I'm not sure they can win 4 or 5 games. I mean, and again, I don't say that critically. That's just realistic. I don't know who they're going to line up. So the idea that you can just line up anybody and go compete in the NFC, it's not that bad. So no, based on what I see right now, my concerns right now are how many games are they going to lose, not how many games are they going to win, because they don't have enough talent right now, but that's to be expected. We're 4 days into free agency and the draft is coming. Quiet, I know you're with us every week, so I want you to do me a favor. Ask us that question again, June 16th when we're at veteran mini camp. I'm not going to cop out on you and say wait till the season starts, but let me see what the depth chart looks like, and then we'll give you an answer, because what the depth chart looks like right now, Sean, I'm not sure they can win 5 games, and we just got to wait and see.
No, as it stands right now, this is not a playoff team. But you gotta let the offseason play out. You can't just look at the first few days of free agency. You have to look at the whole, and that includes free agency. That includes the draft. I'm willing to wait here and see what shakes out over the next couple of weeks and months. And but as of right now, I don't see this being a playoff team. No.
I mean, I don't feel the need to wait at this point. The Bears have not acted enough. They have not acted aggressively in free agency to give us the indication that they plan on competing. So, I mean, if they had come out a little stronger, then yeah, I think they would have had a chance to be in the NFC mix for that 6th or 7th spot. I don't think that's their intention, though. And the plan, to me, clearly indicates that is not their intention.
The one thing I will say before we say goodbye is this is where the wild card comes back to Justin Fields, because for me, the comp style-wise on Justin Fields is Patrick Mahomes. It's Brett Favre. It's those two guys that I separate from all the other GOAT candidates because of their style, their athleticism, and their arm talent, and their gunslinger mentalities. And I think we've seen a little bit of all of that in Justin Fields. Now, he's got miles to go before he belongs in the same sentence with Favre and Mahomes, but that's the style. That's what you hope for. And you saw what Mahomes did with that 1 year on the bench. I think Fields would have been better served by the same thing, but we saw what Mahomes did. If Justin Fields takes that big a leap, in year 2, and we saw Mahomes do it, then all bets are off. Then you don't know how good you can be. But that is, we've only seen it happen, a handful of times in the history of the league. So it seems unlikely. But that's kind of the wild card. And with that, guys, I missed the open, but I'm here for the close, and I guess it is time to say goodbye. We hope you caught us on Monday. We know we missed our Friday slot, but that was more wasn't more. It was completely because of the scheduling from the Bears. Our plan would be back next Friday, unless we're hanging around Hallis Hall waiting to meet Teron Armstead or something. And so 9:30 Chicago time every Friday morning. If you're listening as a podcast, you can join us at 9:30 on Friday mornings and participate. If you enjoy the podcast, that's great too, the way it is. But be sure and get your subscription downloaded from the App Store on your phone, or from iTunes, or from going to shawlocal.com, and stick with us 24/7 at shawlocal.com. Sean and I are going to be beating this up along with Kyle literally daily, 24/7, as we work through this off-season talent acquisition period, and hope to have all the best coverage for you right here. So thanks for being with us today, and we will visit with you again end of this week.